See, you're already talking and we started, so pew, pew, pew.
Hi, welcome to Legends of Tabletop. This is J.M Perkins, creator of the Salt and Wounds campaign setting, and we're glad to have you.
All right, let's do it again. Jesse was laughing.
All right, welcome to Legends of Tabletops. This is game designer J.M Perkins, creator of the Salt and Wounds campaign setting.
Did you just breathe heavy into the mic, Jesse? Are you intentionally trying to just sidetrack everything?
No, I didn't. I was holding my breath.
I
didn't do anything. All right, fellas,
one more?
All right, ready? All right.
You're listening to Legends of Tabletop. This is game designer J.M Perkins, creator of the Salt and Wounds campaign setting.
Well, third time's a charm, right? Welcome, everybody. Of course, no one will hear this because I'll edit all this out, but this is episode 70 of the Legends of Tabletop podcast. As you heard, we have J.M. Perkins with us tonight, talk about his current Kickstarter, Salt and Wounds. We also have Jesse with us tonight. He's not saying anything.
Well, Jesse's a stoic, the radio stoic, where he'll just look at us knowingly.
Yeah, exactly.
They won't know on the podcast, but we'll know because we're looking at a video feed.
I winked and I nodded.
Oh, you winked and nodded. Okay. All right.
That's acceptable for an audio podcast, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You are super staticky, just so that you know.
Which is maybe why I was
communicating
with winks and nods.
You're right.
Right. Would you like me to attempt to reset or?
It's up to you. If you want to jump out and jump back in.
Yeah, you actually got to go. Yeah, you guys are going really robot on my end too. So.
Okay, I'm hoping it's you and not me.
I'll catch up in a minute.
All right. So we will obviously edit all this stuff out. So this will be good filler for the back end of the show after the bumpers if people actually listen past the bumpers, which, whatever. But so thanks for coming on tonight. We appreciate you jumping in.
Yeah, thank you for having me, especially considering how you work to schedule me in. So this could potentially air during the campaign. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you can thank Jesse because he contacted me about the Kickstarter and said, "Hey, we should get him on and we should talk about this Kickstarter and and I want to jump in too and I want to be a part of it." Okay, that works for me.
Yeah, I meant to reach out to some of the podcasts, including yours, because I'm a big fan of Legends of Tabletop, earlier, and I just got caught up in everything else I had to do. And so it really means a lot when people, go the extra mile to make it happen, because you obviously did not have to.
Right. I mean, this is what we're here for, right? I mean, this is part of what we do, so it's part of the service. It's included. We have Jesse back. Jesse, say something. Let's see if you're robot-y still.
Something.
Okay, that sounds good. You're fantastic. I love it. So
Yay.
I would thank you for facilitating for tonight, getting everything prepared, and getting putting this on my radar to have John on tonight. I appreciate that.
Oh, no problem.
All right, we'll roll into our first segment here in this wonky fashion. So we have a thing called Something Cool. So do you have anything cool going on, John, besides your Kickstarter?
Yes, actually. I am about to go to a festival called Utopia. I'll be going to that in 2 weeks. And today I was working on my costume for the Prince-themed happy hour.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Is it like a Comic-Con or some other sort of con?
So this is what's referred to as a Burning Man decompression. So It's what you would expect at Burning Man, just scaled down quite a bit.
So there won't be any fires, maybe only marijuana, not all the hard stuff.
There's definitely going to be fire. Last time I went, there was a Tesla coil. There was a lot of fire. Some art cars. It was a blast.
Cool. Sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Jesse? You got anything going on?
The geekiest thing I've been doing right now is I just totally wiped my computer and installed Linux.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, I've been diligently studying up on Warhammer 40K.
Nice.
For some weird purpose. I don't exactly know why. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Both awesome. Are you running Ubuntu?
I am indeed.
Nice.
We're going to be starting up a Rogue Trader campaign here, I guess, in 2 weeks? next week I think we're going to record.
Next week.
Next Monday. So everybody can tune in for that, or wait until we release that later on as a audio podcast, or do both. That's fantastic. We appreciate both. Download the shit out of everything. The only cool thing I had going on was RenCon. There's a local convention here in Arizona. It was this weekend, so I went to that. It was a lot of fun. I got to meet a bunch of different designers, including John Wick. So we're hoping to schedule something later on with him and a couple other people that I talked to. So that was pretty cool. Got to play a lot of games and an enjoyable weekend. So
Nice.
Can't ever go wrong with more games.
Yeah, definitely. Play more games.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I actually picked up 4 new games. Well, I bought 3 and I won one in a raffle that I didn't even know that I had entered. So that was cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. All right, but so we'll jump into the Kickstarter here. So, in the world, so how did the city come about? Like, what was the thought behind, like, this main focus of the setting here?
Well, perhaps I should introduce it to your listeners that maybe don't know it.
All right.
So, Salt and Wounds, the central conceit of the city is that 200 years ago, the Tarrasque was running amok, as Tarrasques are likely to do. If you're not familiar, in D&D, the Tarrasque is basically fantasy Godzilla, but one of his shticks is that if you cut him, he heals. If you kill him, he comes back to life. He just is always coming back. And he's generally the end game monster you throw at parties that have killed everything else. But in the game, of course, they don't have that knowledge. So they had the problem of this giant monster running around they couldn't kill. So they managed to bound it in place, and they were trying to figure out a way to kill it. But in the meantime, the army that they'd used to subdue it was dispersing. They were stuck up in the mountains and slowly running out of food. And they realized, well, we have all this monster meat lying around. And so they started eating the Tarrasque. That was 200 years ago, and now Salt and Wounds is the weird alien metropolis that's grown up around the perpetual butchery of the Tarrasque.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's the elevator pitch. A little bit too long for an elevator, I think.
Well, it depends on what floor you're going to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when you're in an elevator with me, I compulsively press all the buttons.
There you go.
I'm very popular in the elevator, it's true.
So I will be taking the stairs.
I only care about your health, Jesse. I'm just trying to encourage exercise.
Oh, thanks.
But yeah, so that was the setting, and you were asking how did the thought come about?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, so the original idea was by a guy named Thomas T. on the RPG Net forums. This is back in 2004. And he had posted about a fort where they'd subdued the Tarrasque, and they had started butchering it. And I saw this, and I immediately stopped reading the threads because I knew it was something that I would have to do my own version of. And I wanted that insulation from the process. So I love a couple things in game design, and I try to put these into this concept, which is I really like the concept that every problem is a solution to a different problem. Like, this is probably not ideal for these people to be living this way, but they had a problem and they had a solution to it. And also, it's a problem to it's a solution to a bigger problem, which is starvation. Which fantasy gaming is always weird because magic breaks the economy and logistics. But if you are going to do a vaguely medieval setting, getting everyone enough kilocalories so they don't starve was a major problem throughout most of human history. So to have hypothetically inexhaustible food supply of high-quality protein, that is incredibly valuable to most of human history. And so people would be willing, I thought, to go to really extraordinary lengths to secure that. And what you end up with is, well, potentially they're making the Tarrasque stronger and angrier, and it was already strong enough and angry enough to begin with. But that's not what they intended to do. It's just what they've kind of done. And there's some other stuff I've designed in the sitting. There's a fungal sentient ecosystem that was engineered to process Tarrasque waste. And that also is potentially a huge problem for the city and the world. But it also was a solution to a different problem, which is that all this runoff was coming off the city and poisoning the land. So I really like thinking about logistics. I feel like it grounds works of fantasy, and it was a lot of fun to take this totally fantastic concept of this animal that can't be killed permanently and just play with it and run with it and try to extrapolate out the logistic concerns, the things you could do, and how society would kind of twine around that.
In setting, one of the panels I was in with, I wasn't on, but sat in on with John Wick, and they were talking about world creation, and it's the setting that mechanics are mechanics, but the setting is really what draws players in. So he's like, okay, here's a city on a Tarrasque, like doesn't get much better than that, right? So it's like, here's a crazy idea, we're going to do this thing, now what?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and actually, that's something that I think I would encourage people who are designing game worlds for themselves to think about is, and I should point out, that's one thing that people still debate about. I always envisioned Salt Moons as being built around the Tarrasque. I think the city is actually bigger than it. However, a lot of people really like the idea of the city on top of the Tarrasque, and I think that's totally cool if you want to do it that way. It's just not quite what I had envisioned, but also would be a very cool city. But my earlier point was that I think when you're designing game worlds, if you're going to do something like Middle-earth, people already have really great options to play in Middle-earth. People really have great options to play in all the traditional kind of D&D settings that we think of. So it's my opinion, and again, take it for what it's worth, that if you're going to design a new game world, have a compelling reason why people would want to play in your world in particular. What kind of stories can they tell there that they aren't necessarily going to get to tell elsewhere? And I think that's a good thing to have in the back of your mind as you're making a game world, especially if you're looking to get it out in front of people, is why should they pay attention?
Now, when you created Salt in the Moons, did you intend this to be its own independent world, or is it kind of, especially with the Kickstarter and everything, did you intend this to be a standalone, or be it something that people can kind of take and drop into their own campaigns or their own worlds?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So my first ideal is I want to make a city that is so compelling and so vibrant and has so much stuff going on that you could set an entire years-long campaign there and have completely satisfied players. So in that respect, yes, an urban setting that is so complete that could be all the players interact with. From there, though, I have very much designed it to be modular because you say you really like Galarian. Of course, I can't use Galarian because it's product identity of Paizo, but I want to give you the tools that you can take Salt and Moons and plop it into whatever setting you want to play in, and it can be this great thing that either is isolated because it has this weird economy and ecology, or give you tools to start talking about how it's affecting the larger game world and tools to get your players interested in it. Technically, nice. Salt and Moons, yeah. And technically, Salt and Moons is part of a larger setting I was developing called Sonoma, which the elevator pitch for that is it looks a lot like your standard D&D world, but it is a world trapped in a magical Cold War, where the magics and artifacts that people have been digging up are the equivalent of nuclear weapons. The great powers don't go to war with each other because mutually assured destruction. They call it the all-consumption doctrine. And the role adventurers have in that world is they tend to be war by others means, where you are plausibly deniable forces that could be used to accomplish states' aims, and will be written off if you mess up. So yeah, that's technically
like Black Ops.
Yeah, very much so. And also, so you figure out a dungeon is in an enemy land, like that's a state secret. Like that might have the next great weapon of war there. And so you very much want to get it before your enemy does. And so you can't send in an army, you just send in some guys. And there's a couple other things going, but that's kind of the bigger world that Salt and Moons is technically in. Although I think I've very much been trying to be diligent in designing Salt and Moons that you do not need to know anything about that or care about it to really enjoy Salt and Moons.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then is this entire world the setting that you did, is this something that you've created with a group at a table and now you're just putting it on paper, or is this something that you've actually designed by yourself specifically as a campaign? Yeah,
so I had kind of parallel evolution. I ran a couple games with it. I actually ended up doing a high-end game for my Patreon subscribers. Nice. And so a lot of development, I was designing the world around player choices. But separate from that, of course, I had agreed to, via the Patreon funding, do consistent weekly posts. And that was very much looking at, okay, what does a setting need? What does a setting book need? And trying to guide my post with what would be most useful to GMs. with the one caveat being is I really, I've been writing about it for a year and a half. Through most of that, I've designed it to be system agnostic. And GMs often need stat blocks. You want the stat blocks for the monsters. So it's cool to do monster descriptions, and I've tried to make those as compelling as possible and usable in whatever system or no system. But now with Kickstarter, it's really nice because we're going to be able to do some great crunch design.
Yeah, I've actually known one of the things that I noticed right off the bat when first looking at Salt in the Wound. So, God, what is it? Probably about a year and a half now that you first released it.
Yeah.
Is that, at first I was like, oh well, this is for. I assumed that it was for Pathfinder. Started digging into it a little bit more. I realized that you had just completely taken out mechanics from the whole thing. So did you have kind of this publication mindset when you decided to make it system agnostic, or was it just purely because you wanted to open it up to more people, make it available to everybody?
A little bit of both. I did want to cast as wide a net as possible. At the time when I started writing, the OGL for 5e hadn't come out. And so I was really interested to see what would happen with that. So it was this nice thing where I got to design and develop. And even though a lot of my professional writing life is designing crunch, I personally enjoy fluff more. That's just a personal preference. So it was a lot of fun to get to focus on that and cast a very wide net and only start doing the crunch as I had a better idea of how things worked, what was probably the most interesting things to design those rule sets for, and also what systems I actually wanted to commit to, which ended up being Pathfinder and 5e.
Yeah.
Makes the most sense, right? I mean, that's where you're going to get all that player engagement from, whatever the newest thing is.
Oh, very much so, very much so. And like I said, my personal preference is I like to be system agnostic, and I make my own rules and rulings. That said, though, I totally understand people want to buy a complete work that they can easily take the elements and run it in their game. That's why they hire game designers, is because they do all that work. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. And that actually ends up presenting its own problem and own interesting challenges of, okay, so I have this cool concept. Can I make a game mechanic that is equally as cool? Can I translate this guy's mutant arm in a way that's satisfying in the stats and has its own beauty and its own creativity?
Cool. How long were you actually working on the project before bringing it to the public?
I first post about it, and I did brainstorm. So yeah, it's been over a year and a half, and all of that has been in the public.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
There was a thread on Reddit, right, when you first started?
Oh yeah, I had some great support on Reddit. I was doing a monthly or weekly post there. When I spun it off, because first it was part of the website Tribality, which is great, but after a while I realized I wanted a certain interlinking. I wanted to have that feel of like a great wiki you get lost in, where one link leads to a next, and wow, you just spent several hours reading my work. I really wanted to design that feel into the website.
You succeeded.
Oh, thank you. So I spun it off into its own website, and once I was doing consistent weekly posts, I felt like I get a little bit much for Reddit, so I'd only post like kind of the best of the best. But yeah, Reddit has been huge, both just supporting me and giving me encouragement when I first started writing, and then just as far as a financial end for the Kickstarter, they have been my the biggest community that's supported, and by far the one that's been contributing the most.
How long did it take for you to reach your funding? Because you've well blown past what you were asking for already.
Oh yeah. So as we're talking, and this will probably be different when the podcast comes out, I'm 450% funded. The initial goal was 5,000. We're at 22,620, and we were funded in.
Well, you've made an extra 1,500 since yesterday. Nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We were funded. I think it was like 6 hours.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I thought 5,000 was a very reasonable goal. I thought 5,000 I put the goal as because that's what I would take for me to do justice to the concept. I thought I was fairly confident. Like I have this audience. There's a cool concept. I was gonna get to like 10,000 and 20,000 to me was gonna be incredible success. And now we've blown right through that in less than a week. And we're really looking at, gosh, I don't actually know how big this thing's going to do. And now I have the other very interesting challenge of making sure I don't overcommit. Because, of course, we've all had experiences with great concepts and designers that really meant well and really wanted to put out great work. And they became a victim of their own success because they could manage a smaller project and they couldn't manage a bigger one.
It took me almost 2 years to get my artisan dice, so I understand.
Oh, yeah.
And how do you sit as far as stretch goals go? Are you scratching your head at this point? Like, each day as you log in and there's another 1,000 and another 1,000?
Yeah, so we have blown through 7 stretch goals. I actually have to update the image because it only shows us reaching 6. That's kind of how it's been. I haven't been able to keep up with updating the image to do that cool little X to show what stretch goals we've made. The next ones will be a little bit harder because the gaps between them has gone up. But realistically, I think it's reasonable to at least plan for the reality that we might hit all the stretch goals. And then I think it's an interesting question of whether I'm going to create more. I posted today, I will do more stretch goals if I have interesting ideas that will not take me too much work. Like if it's something I can hire out completely and be very satisfied with that, I would be totally willing to do more stretch goals. But as far as the ones we have, I'll be tapped for what I can produce as me being the limiting feature. So, I mean, I'd love to have more money. It'll help me invest more in the project and in my career. But I won't promise more, I don't think, because I don't want to promise what I can't deliver.
Sure. Now, did you have some of that stuff? Did you have some of that
Go
stuff?
ahead, John.
Third time's a charm. We're gonna stay with that theme.
Yeah.
Did you have some of those Kickstarter stretch goals in your pocket already? As far as, okay, well, if we hit this one, I know I'm already, I have this material prepared or at least outlined or whatever, so I can knock it out in a month or whatever.
Right. So the first 3 I was very confident about. I have good outlines and a lot of initial work done, and I also have some designers in mind that I can hire. The next 4, the big maps. If I can get who I want to get those, I think it'll be very clear path getting those produced. The bigger supplements there, the one for the Heartsplit Marsh and the Cap's Mega Dungeon, those are not as complete. They're outlined, but it'll really come down to, for me, able to release them on time, especially with everything else I'm doing, is my ability to delegate. Sure. Thankfully, though, with the amount of success I've had with this, is the money's there. So I can hire great people. I can hire professionals. It's just whether I'm going to be able to get out of my own way and manage that.
Okay.
And then the adventure path, that would be a huge challenge. We're not there yet, but like I said, that might well be where we go. The one thing I will say, though, and I'm communicating this with my fans, the project, delivery dates, that's for all the core books. And I'm very much focused on getting the core books out before I deliver the stretch goals. My goal is to deliver all the core books by May 2017, and all the books by September 2017. And I think that's a really good balance of the core books are mostly done, and I'll get a good production schedule going with them. The stretch goals are a little bit more outlined, less complete. But as I run up the production, as I work with freelancers, and I give myself a whole year to do it. Yeah, very much so. I should point out, this is by far my biggest Kickstarter, but it's my 3rd Kickstarter, and I've always been able to deliver on time.
Very nice. Now, you have right now a Patreon page.
I do.
So what is the major differences between the Patreon and the Kickstarter, and what made you decide to turn this into Kickstarter?
Well, that's a great question. I actually always envisioned a hybrid path. All of my Patreon backers, their total support via Patreon, that counts as a Kickstarter pledge. So they are all, nice. So all the money they gave me over the course of the last year, they're all pledged at that. And if you notice, so The higher end reward, which I'm amazed we sold out for, is the Binder Lord.
Mm-hmm.
That was a $250 pledge. The reason there's 13 Binder Lords in Salt and Wounds, but there was only 11 of these available via the Kickstarter because the first 2 had already been claimed by patrons.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was kind of, if people were willing to support me when it was more in a rough draft stage and get in earlier, if that had value to them and they wanted to engage with me in that way, I wanted to give them a way to do that via Patreon. And I also wanted to practice doing promotion where it was over the long haul. Because, like I said, I'd done Kickstarters where it's like a month and you go a little crazy because you live and breathe that. But I wanted to try, okay, so this is something I'm doing. It's not going to be all my time, but I'm going to promote it. I'm going to try to build this audience and in a very sustainable, like slow burn way. The funny thing is, my plan is I was going like, okay, I'll so do the Kickstarter, and then the Patreon will switch over to Sonoma, and I'll be aiming to do this Sonoma Kickstarter next year, right around the time I'm delivering Salt and Wounds. With how successful that we've been with Salt and Wounds, I'm actually going to be putting the Patreon on hiatus and just focusing on Salt and Wounds.
Nice.
I also, well, no, it's a great problem to have, right? Like, obviously,
Right.
I like the larger setting, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to work on it. But in the meantime, I'm so happy this is getting the response it's getting. And like I said, I want to honor that. And part of honoring that is clearing anything that I can that'll get in the way of me completing this sometime. I should also point out, while I was writing Salt and Wounds, I was writing for a couple websites and a couple magazines, and just being able to juggle all of that. And I'm putting all of that on hiatus for Salt and Wounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely, I think, in terms of the fans of this project, definitely shows a dedication on your part that I'm sure that they'll appreciate. So.
Oh yeah, and it's hard, right? Because there's that classic concept that the moment of victory is maybe some of the most dangerous moments for people.
Yeah.
It's such a temptation to overcommit. Every day I have people offering me great ideas on things I could do, and I really appreciate that. But also, I'm very much like, no, I'm only going to commit to what I'm very confident I can produce. And the other stuff, I might get to it, I might not, but I'm not going to commit to it if I can't, in good faith, say that I will do it. Like creating stuff, like doing a German translation or getting Fantasy Grounds integration, doing adapting it for other settings or rule sets. All great ideas and all stuff I would love to do. But I don't want to get in the way of the core mission.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right. You want to get books in people's hands.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So are you using the same artists, or are you adding new artists to the project for some of the expanded products? How are you handling your art?
Yeah. So I'll be using Jeffrey Chen some more. I'd definitely be using other artists. When I initially planned, because again, I was thinking about like a $5,000, $10,000 Kickstarter. My plan was to do a mix of original and stock art, which is very much in line with kind of the norms of how third-party publishing is doing. With how this is going, and again, I'll really have to crunch the numbers, but I'm leaning right now towards doing all original art. So there's Jeffrey Chen, and there's a couple other artists I already know. And even though we'll be doing different artists, I'm going to try to keep everything on the style that's already being presented because I love it. I think it's iconic. I think it looks great. Jeffrey Chen did amazing work, and he took really great direction and accomplished exactly what I was going for, which my idea for Salt and Wounds, kind of culturally and aesthetically, is kind of a mix of what I described to Jeffrey Chen as Norse practicality and kind of Chinese imperial excess. And the little you won't be able to see on the podcast, but one of the big images is this diagram they have for butchering the Tarrasque, where they show where the harpoons enter. And I gave them old Chinese medicine diagrams where they have these ideas of these lines of energy in people. And I told them to do something like that. And then for the writing, I told them basically do something halfway in between Norse runes, which is an alphabet called the Elder Futhrak. Forgive me if I mispronounce it. And Chinese, I believe they're called lograms, or the character writing. And so he created this whole runic script that I think accomplishes exactly that.
Yeah.
It's
funny
cool.
the way that I.
Go ahead.
The way that I actually got into or discovered Salt in the Wounds was on the Reddit Imaginary Characters.
Oh,
Because,
really?
somebody had posted the God Butcher
That was
illustration.
actually me. I actually posted him.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally remember
And as
doing
soon as
that.
I saw that, and then I went down a wiki hole on your website, and I was like, oh, this is what? And that's, yeah.
My plan worked perfectly. Yes, yes. I'm doing. You won't be able to tell on the radio, but I'm doing evil finger steepling right now, like Mr. Burns style. Yes, yes.
I was just going to say that the image is very striking. It's very cool. It does have that sort of, almost like Chinese on parchment, like say with all the diagrammatical, structure of it. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I'm so happy with Jeffrey Trent's art, and I'm so happy that a lot of this is my kind of design aesthetics and kind of just things that I think would be cool, and it really seems to be resonating with people.
Mm-hmm.
Also, can I talk about one of the things I'm so happy to be distributing, and I think I'm going to have to distribute a bunch of it. So one of the add-ons for the higher-end backers, I should say some of the swag for higher-end backers is Tarrasque jerky.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to buy wholesale a supply of alligator jerky, and then repackage it with this Tarrasque diagram image, and just do some scribble writing about where the meat came from and when it was extracted. Because people need to know.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
When your Tarrasque jerky was butchered.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you need to know if it's flank or hind quarter. That's important.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got to prepare it differently, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Non sequitur, I guess. Have you ever had alligator yourself?
I haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoy it. Again, the common thing is people will say it tastes like chicken. I think that's just a catch-all when you don't know how else to describe it. But yeah, I actually enjoyed alligator.
We tricked my daughter into eating it one year. We were down at the Outer Banks, so we went to this place called Dirty Dick's. So it's a seafood place, so you get a steak and a burger or whatever if you don't want seafood. Mm-hmm. So they have alligator, we should get it. So we're like, yeah, all right, we'll get it. So and it came in almost like popper style. So they brought it to the table, and we told our daughter, I don't remember how old she was at the time. So how we got chicken. We got chicken. She's like, oh, okay, cool. So she starts eating it. She has 3 or 4 of them. And we're both laughing. She's, why are you guys laughing? You're eating alligator, right? And she just looked like, what? And then she was like, yeah, fuck it. And then she just kept eating it. It was great.
Nice. Yeah, if I don't think you knew better, you could just totally think it was chicken that had been prepared in an interesting way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a little chewier, right? I mean, it has a little bit more of a rubbery consistency.
The texture is definitely different. And the cuts that I was having, it felt like it was layered, right? So it was like a fat layer and like a muscle layer in a way that chicken seems more, or at least if you're eating chicken breast, very consistent texture. But yeah, even so, I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I think the only time I've ever had alligator tail when I was down in Virginia.
What'd you think?
And it was it's a little chewy, a little bit, I don't necessarily want to say fibrous, but yeah, it tasted really good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. So hopefully the backers really enjoy their Tarrasque jerky.
Right.
So
go ahead.
So in terms of the project that you have going on, and with Salt in the Wounds, you've managed to add quite a few new archetypes and such to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
What was how much testing have you done with those, and how did you choose to add what into the world? Like, I know that you have, for at least for 5th edition, you have the Paladin Oath and stuff like that. So what made you choose those specifically?
So the way I chose them, and I've placed them a little bit with my patrons, but the way I chose them is based on okay, so trying to think from a player's perspective of who would they want to be in the city. Like, what would be the kinds of things they would want to do, and how do you support a interesting class customization that supports that? 5e, I think, is very elegantly designed, where it's really cool creating these, not a whole new class, but a class customization. And, of course, one of the things that I thought about is kind of, well, who are the God Butchers? Like, what do they really care about? And to me, it felt like what they really cared about was keeping the Tarrasque bound. But that's a little bit too granular for a class customization. So if you talk about people on a holy mission, maybe their bigger mission is keeping dangerous evils contained, right? They recognize that they just aren't going to be able to kill everything. It just doesn't work. So, of course, they'll destroy it if they can. But more importantly is keep it contained. And then when you think that they have that mindset, start looking at options and powers they use to shut down their enemies, to stop movement, to stop abilities, and get them to translate in an interesting way. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to the character customizations.
Yeah. Now, in terms of, because you are releasing it both for 5th edition and for Pathfinder, how did you find the balance between the two systems? Because I know, like, with, Pathfinder does have archetypes, but they work completely different than 5th edition, so.
Right. My thing is the fluff carries over. If you can get, you really do have to do the translation where you try to stay true to the concept, even if when the mechanics look different, because they're different games. The power increase is different. So I'm really comfortable with, here's the core concept. We can reinvent the wheel for each system because you have to. Because the direct make this work and make this square peg fit in this round hole, it doesn't work. It takes a lot more, what I would say is creative freedom, as long as it's grounded in, okay, so here's these paladin guys. Their deal is they keep dangerous creatures contained. That's part of their oath and how they honor themselves. And then here are some options for what that looks like mechanically, but it's going to be different for Pathfinder and 5e.
Nice.
And it's basically, I feel like it's not even, you can't even save yourself work, right? Like, the fluff's the same, the concept's the same, but you're redesigning from scratch. I think that's the only way I know how to do it.
Right. Yeah, there's absolutely no way that you can say, okay, well, this ability, I can transfer this over into, because even, I've done, not even remotely on your level, but we've done, like, custom classes for our home campaign. We've created stuff in Pathfinder, and then we're like, okay, well, we're transitioning over to D&D 5e, so let's see if we can just kind of parse this and make it nope, you have to break the like scratch, make sure that you're keeping the flavor, but there's really no way to carry anything over from one to another.
Right, but it's tempting, right? Because if you're not super deep in the systems, they have a couple superficial similarities. They're like, they're not so different. Right, but they
both have an AC.
Right, exactly. And don't get me wrong. Like, if you learn one, learning the other is going to be a little bit easier for you than learning from zero. But yeah, the similarities I think can get in the way of you understanding the differences. And you really do have to be able to design for each system independently. And what carries over, like we said, is that core concept in that description, the concept, even when the mechanics end up looking quite different.
Now, what was easier because you have some archetypes that are included in the setting, but then you also have the brand new class of the alchemist. So which one was easier, kind of creating just a smaller archetype that you can piece into it, or being like, okay, well, I get to actually create this from scratch and just fit it in however I wanted?
Well, for me, the easier one was creating the class because someone else did that.
Really?
Yeah. The Alchemist, and don't get me wrong, I include it because I love it, and it's perfect for Salt and Wounds. It's better. Absolutely. It's better than I could have done. But the 5e Alchemist PDF that's included, it was developed by a friend of mine and some game designer I really admire named Rich Howard. And what's great about that is because it's all done. So that comes out in November. Once we've done processing all the rewards and all the pledges. So that was just, when I saw what he had done, it was a no-brainer. I wanted to include it. I wanted to throw it in there. And then for the class customizations, like I said, I'm really happy with the 5e class. I'm not super enamored by the idea of creating like 15 all new classes for Salt and Wounds, right? I think that creating archetypes and customizations is going to give players tons of options to do really interesting things without, overwhelming them with choice and recreating what other people have done maybe better.
Yeah.
To go back to talk about the city a little bit, so you said there was different interpretations as far as how the city was laid out. So
Right.
is essentially your main thrust that the Tarrasque is just sort of standing there, and the city is built up around it and maybe partially onto it?
Yeah, so there's actually a map on the Kickstarter. It's not the final art, but you can totally see how I envision the city laid out. I see the Tarrasque on its side, cut into, bored into, is big enough that you could get trapped inside. I see it as Godzilla-sized. But the other corollary is this is a really big city. So imagine Godzilla just got knocked down in a fairly big city and never got back up again. And that's how Salt and Wounds is laid out. And the other thing, too, is they have built a fortress around the Tarrasque, not necessarily to keep the Tarrasque in, but to keep all the riffraff out, because there is a sizable contingent that want to free it or kill it, which is not good for the city for different reasons.
Right. And then there's various factions that have sort of developed now to utilize this resource. So you've got, people who are, involved in this part of the butchering, the distribution, the consumption, like all these different now crafts and things that spring up from, hey, now we live on this giant monster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And really what I've tried to do in designing this city, obviously this is never a one-to-one translation, but one of the things I'm trying to hearken to is the petrochemical revolution. So we as moderns don't necessarily appreciate how many incredible advances in material science are really due to our ancestors figuring out really interesting things to do with coal and then later oil, right? Like so many of the dyes we use are petroleum-based. So many of the weird, the lubricants for sure, but all this stuff we use, so much of it is based on figuring out cool things to do with petroleum. The only problem with that, of course, is there's environmental costs. Most recently, like we can see it messing with the water table, and that's totally something that's happening with Salt and Wounds. So it's really interesting it's never going to be a one-to-one ratio, and certainly I never want to preach, but I have these ideas about like how human behavior has been shaped by industrial revolutions, right? And getting to plug that into the scene and power it is really cool. Another thing I did like that, so I am an avowed carnivore. I love eating meat, and I am in no way going to stop. I've gone hunting. I really enjoy it. I think it's a great way to honor the animal, and some people disagree with me. I'm okay with that. That said, I am really deeply uncomfortable with kind of how we treat animals on an industrial scale. Like I said, I'm cool to eat them, but we treat the animals that we eat kind of horribly while they're alive. And so it's interesting to take kind of that moral ambivalence, I feel, where, yeah, this is an ideal, but I'm not going to stop, and translate it into, a city setting where instead of this is something they're doing to, 10 million chickens, they're just doing to one creature that won't die.
Mm-hmm. Now you have, in the setting, you have other aspects of it, like the mutants and the caps and stuff like that. Is that a similar message that you're trying to convey, or is that purely an idea that you had from the side effects of the Tarrasque?
Well, that's more just carrying things through their end. So there's some stuff designed because it's game logic, right? Some stuff's designed because I'm carrying consequences through the end. And some stuff designed just because of rule of cool, and then I figure out a reason to justify it after the fact. So I should point out, like, I do like to have some themes and some ideas, some anxieties that I have in the back of my head when I start designing stuff. But ultimately, the work that's designed is not about that. It's about making something compelling and cool on its own right. So as far as your question with the mutants and the caps, the mutants come around just because I'm just going to go rule of cool. I think mutants are really cool. I love mutation tables. I thought there was a plausible reason to have that be an issue in the city. And then it was really fun getting to to run with that and say, okay, so I want mutations. So what are the social effects? Well, mutants are looked down upon, right? Mutants are looked at as though they had done something wrong, even though it can happen to anybody, right? So if you're high class and you become mutated, you're kind of going to get put in the attic, right? Or if you're low class, or if you're mutated and you were middle class, now you're suddenly low class because only dirty poor people have that happen to them. And so it's this thing with like, okay, I like mutations, I like mutation tables, I like cool guys with big mutant arms that get strong from it and can throw spines, right? But then figuring out, okay, how does this? That's me outside the world. What do the people inside the world think about it?
Right. Cool. Now, you also have, for Salt and Wounds, you've developed your own coinage and your own calendar and even the 200 plus year history of the entire setting. Is that your determination to follow through and to create a complete setting for the user? Or are you like me and you just have way too much free time on your hands and you just dig way too deep into things?
Oh, it's very much my desire to follow through. Free time is not something I have a hyperabundance of, but if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So for me, and most of the table that I played at, people just talk about gold pieces or silver pieces. That's what they say. They say GP, CSP. And frankly, most of the games I've played, everything just gets rounded to GP, right?
Right.
But as a designer, I design for all kinds of play. So I want the person who really likes role-playing and really likes that to really get in the character to know what the coins are called and know the interesting little facts about the coin. And the funny thing for me as a game designer is I'm not necessarily that guy. So while I was talking about what the coins are called, I have to look at my notes and find out what the coins are called because I wrote it and then I forgot it because I was moving on to the next thing. So just out of curiosity, the coins of Salt Moons, they have a center cone, so they are kind of pokey. And this is nice because it allows them to make even stacks where they can easily push stacks of coin back and forth without them toppling over. But also, potentially, if you hold them wrong, they can jut into your flesh, which I like this thematic thing of like the city is not necessarily comfortable and pain is just kind of something they deal in. And then, of course, for what the coins are called, copper coins are called spikes, silver coins are called scales, gold coins are called bone, and platinum coins are called horns. Like I said, as a GM or player, I probably wouldn't use those terms because I wouldn't remember them. But I designed for all kinds of tables. It was actually really interesting. Before while I was designing this, I read a really great essay. I think it was called The 8 Kinds of Fun. And what it did is and forgive me, I might be misquoting it, but it broke down the different types of fun people have at tables. And so some people are there to just mess around with their friends and have a good time. Some people are there for a power fantasy. Some people are there because they love role-playing. Some people are there because they love the artistry, right? They love the cool painted minis and the terrain. And what was interesting about this article is it said that generally people are 3 or 4 of these types of funs. They're not all of the types of fun, right? So, excuse me, I'm going to cough. That was really informative to me to level up as a designer is, okay, so I have the 3 or 4 types of fun that I really like. But I want to design for everybody. I want there to be someone who really loves the tactile joy of getting like a candle that came out of the world of Salt and Wounds and has an interesting odor and has a backstory to it. And it's a physical object they can touch and smell and interact with. Even though for me, I'm much more interested in getting into the game, right? And the props for me sometimes distract, but I'm totally down with the people whose props add something to them, and I want to give those guys a great play experience too.
Right. Now, I think that just shows there's a lot of GMs out there who think, well, I've designed my own campaign. I can design a book. It's not a problem. And I think what you just said shows the difference between a dedicated DM and a dedicated developer. Because when as a GM, I design for my table, for my players, and I know exactly what they like, and I don't have to worry about the 5 or 6 other things. But like you said, you have to worry about absolutely everything because you have to cover every single type of player.
Oh yeah. Well, and for me, this is something, and I'm still developing as a creator, but I think one of the big things that differentiates professionals from talented amateurs is, one thing, professionals more often than not will hit their deadlines. And so that's something I'm going to do for Salt and Wounds. But the other thing, too, is the professionals are willing to do the unfun bits, right? The parts that need to happen, because that's how you can create a complete product. But that aren't necessarily part of the thing that creator thinks is the most fun. And you know what? If you want to stick to the fun, by all means, do it and have a great time. But understand, like, if you ever want to make that bridge that professional gap, it'll take you doing some of the parts that you don't find fun and getting good at them and finding joy and satisfaction in that work.
Okay. And you're an author as well. Do you find that having that background helps in your, like setting design and your fluff and stuff like that, as opposed to getting in and detailing the mechanics?
Oh yeah, very much so. And I would say that's definitely my strength as a designer. Is I'm much better and more comfortable with the fluff because my background is as a writer of fiction. Actually, I'm really happy with that background, and I still write fiction occasionally. I've sold about 24 short stories. I actually had one appear on NPR. They did a full cast recording. I'd won a contest. That was really cool. And so I do have this background in, that's the world creation, that's creating interesting characters, that's creating interesting storylines. But one of the fascinating things about writing fiction versus creating for game content is when you write fiction, you're telling a story. When you're game designing, you're more creating tools that people are going to pick up and create interesting stories with.
Right.
Now, you do have a fiction tab on the Salt and Wounds website.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you're going to be really built up with the Kickstarter probably over the next, possibly year, and you have the expansion of the setting that you want to kickstart as well. But you said you have a writing background. Is that something that you eventually want to pursue and bring this outside of just RPGs?
That's a really excellent question. I had not considered writing a novel for it. I could totally... the fiction was... the next Patreon goal that we didn't quite reach was me producing fiction regularly for the setting. And so that's why that fiction tab is there. We didn't quite get there, which is totally fine. But I will definitely be writing for fiction for Salt and Wounds because all the supplements will have some fiction just interwoven in them. Excuse me again. For the section breaks, and then just for extra material, I really like fiction. I really like how it sets the world and can immediately plug you into what you might expect the heroes to be doing in this place.
Right.
Now your background is wow, long weekend. So your background is as an author.
Yep.
When did you start designing games? When did you get into that aspect of things?
Yeah, so I started writing for games about 4 years ago. My first really big project was the Adequate Commoner 2 years ago, and that was a complete 150 page supplement that I wrote 95% of, and I put out through a publisher called Misfit Studios. So that was a pretty big project, and that one was... It started as kind of this joke that I told myself, which was, what would an optimization guide for commoners look like? Because, when I was... Sometimes optimization guides get a bad rap because, of course, power gamers. But I always found them really useful in Pathfinder especially because there's so much options. Getting an idea of what works really good mechanically versus what doesn't, I think frees you up to make characters and, for me, focus on the more interesting bits. So I had this idea of, I should write an optimization guide for commoners. Haha, that's funny. It'll be 10 pages. And as I started writing it, it just kept growing and growing. And I got really interested in what commoners were in a historical way. I got really interested in what you could do with them in the system. And I ended up creating this whole book that, we had the successful Kickstarter for. Got to deliver it. Was great fun. Other than that, I've written, I contributed to a bunch of little supplements. Some from Misfit Studios, some from the Avalon Game Company. And then I started writing for Tribality last year, actually 2 years ago, which of course now is an Emmy-nominated website and has been very successful. Cool. So yeah, it's been really interesting to transfer from primarily writing fiction to writing for games. It takes, it's a lot of the same skills and it's a lot of new skills, but I've really enjoyed the challenge.
Cool. The Commoners book would be great for DCC. They definitely need some optimization there.
Oh yeah. Well, and I'll try to avoid gushing about Adequate Commoner because it was just such a fun project and something I was super engaged with, and so work I'm really proud of. But just the one thing I'll say about it is just the perspective of, again, I really like to look to history for inspiration, and much like with Salt and Moons, one of the big things is being able to produce enough food for people would historically be world changing. In the same way, when you look at adventurers and commoners, most of fighting and dying and warring and exploring throughout human history, that was done by commoners. These were not professional military folks. These were not landed elites that had been trained for 2 decades in how to fight. These were just a farmer that got given a pitchfork. And oftentimes they did very badly, but also sometimes they did surprisingly well. And so many of what we think of as cool weapons began as, modified farm equipment. And so it was really cool with that project, and also with Salt and Wounds, sure, you're in this high fantasy world, but people are still people. And people are going to find a way to survive, and people are going to find a way to thrive if they can, even in totally incredible circumstances.
I'll gush for you for just a moment because I want to give John a quick commenter. And you said it's going to be a project that only 8-10 pages, and then somehow you turned it into 200. But it actually makes a lot of sense when you actually get into the book, because you think of even fighting as a level 1 class.
Yeah.
And any PC, you still have a certain number of hit points and abilities and things like that, but you don't have those as a commoner. So the book is actually filled more with a lot of tactics and the thinking of commoners.
Oh yeah.
And different different ways that they use their abilities, which I was actually kind of blown away with when I started reading through it, because I actually think it's a great product, not just for people who want to run a level 0 commoner campaign or even a one shot, but it gave me a lot of ideas to bring into even a high powered character. Just something more than just, I swing my axe and I roll a d20 and.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and I feel like there's always this tension in game design where game design done badly is just a treadmill, right? So you now you start by swinging 1d6. Next level, you swing for 2d6. Next level after that, you swing for 3d6. And basically what happens on the other end is, first level, the creatures have 1d6 hit points. The next level, they have 2d6 hit points. And the third level, they have 3d6 hit points. And some people like that number increase really pleases them. But for me...
They play 4th edition.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always balanced, right? You are always at the same footing. I really like game design that, sure, you're getting stronger and you probably should get better at your core competencies, but also the thing about leveling and the thing about playing is it gives you more options. It gives you more tools. And part of that is what's happening on your character sheet, and hopefully part of that's what's happening for you as a player.
All right, I think a lot of people don't, oftentimes when leveling a character, don't necessarily think about the mechanics, and they think about, I get this ability and I get this spell and this feat, but they don't think about what they've been doing with their character and how they can use that stuff outside of just pure mechanics and pure dice rolling.
Oh, yeah. Well,
so that's what, yeah.
Well, and then the thing is when you think that way, as a player, you potentially get to have this variance where sometimes you're fighting things that are your level, that you may be going more toe-to-toe with. Sometimes you can fight things that are above your level because you have tactical advantage and you've thought about this fight and how it's supposed to go. Sometimes you can be challenged by things that are below your level because they're using that same thinking against you.
Yeah.
And I think that having that entire range and spectrum of encounters and play makes it a lot more compelling than just the same note every time.
Right.
Okay. You'd mentioned earlier that you were getting a lot of good ideas from fans and backers and stuff as far as different things you could add to the setting, or
Oh yeah,
do something in German. So how much? Wow, longest day ever. How much impact has that social media feedback played in helping you to design and or change elements either of the setting or, maybe what you thought you would include initially and, okay, well, we're going to take this out and we're going to put this in or, anything along those lines?
Oh, it's been absolutely critical. And that's something I designed into it and I wanted. I think that's part of the reason why you should do a Kickstarter instead of just publishing the book. Obviously, the funding is great and the notoriety is great, but more so, I think it allows for a different kind of conversation around creation. And it's hard to do well. Don't get me wrong. It's really easy to do badly. But I think doing it well is something worth pursuing. One of the main contributors to the Kickstarter was started as a Patreon backer. He liked it, and he started pitching me ideas, and I liked working with him. And I'm like, I want you to be a major contributor. And I actually had him cancel his pledge because I'm a big believer in money flows to the writer. And in this case, he's the writer. So, of course, I'd love, the 4 beers or whatever he was buying me a month. But at the same time, ultimately, after a certain point, no, I'm going to be paying you. Right? That's how it goes. So that's something that's totally baked in. I've included a bunch of fan contributions. There was a great post someone had given to me on Reddit where it was they had done Salt and Steam, and it was like 2 paragraphs of so this is 200 years after they found the Tarrasque. Salt and Steam was like 1,000 years after they'd done the found the Tarrasque, and it gave me 2 paragraphs, and I friggin' love this. And so I did it. I took that and I wrote 5 pages from it and just posted it up. And it was funny too because when I posted that on Reddit, people were like, "Oh, I don't like Salt and Wounds, but this is amazing." Right? There was some people that just what you did on your own, not so much. What you did from this other guy's work, I'm much more interested in that. So yeah, it's this ongoing conversation, and of course, I want people to feel respected, and I want want people to get a chance to contribute. I don't want to overpromise that I will definitely be incorporating their ideas if I don't like them or they don't work. And then ultimately, at a certain level, I won't be content for people just to give me something. I will want to pay them.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's one of the neat things about Kickstarter. We do so many of these interviews. People have stuff on Kickstarters. Is the accessibility of the designer or whatever project it is to the people who are backing. It's a very cool system to be involved in and be a part of.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And then, like I said, with Patreon, everyone was getting access to my post early when I was actually ahead of deadline. They were getting to vote on different aspects of the city. And their contributions and feedback are totally baked into how the city works. And right now, one of the big things, and I'm super pleased that all of these went. The highest tier reward for Salt and Wounds was the Binder Lord tier. And like I said, 2 of those got claimed just because my Patreon backers, that was the level they were at already. And then 11 were available. They all got snatched up within 5 days. Which I'm like, wow. Oh, I want to give people if you really want to throw a bunch of money at me, I'll give you something to do that. But I did not expect, all of these would be gone. And I've actually had people ask, hey, can you do more? I'm like, no, because there's only 13 of these things, and I'm not going to, make up stuff. Because, that was part of it. You are one of these 13 guys, right? So they're going to be very much involved in the design for these Meridian houses, these aristocratic houses. And they'll need my approval, but they're going to all choose the command words that release these harpoons out of the Tarrasque. So
that's great.
Yeah, their design, their ideas will totally be baked into this setting.
Very cool.
Yeah. From the actual play, it was suggested that one of the command words was banana, and we joked about what banana could mean in a fantasy world. Were there bananas in this fantasy world, or was it some ancient word of power like banana?
You're right. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take this last one, Jesse?
Sure. So now that you've cruised past your goal, and I believe you are most assuredly going to hit and or exceed your 50,000 goal. So exactly how much time and effort have you been putting into choreographing your celebration dance? Or is it just something that you're kind of going to just make up off the cuff? And where's the YouTube link going to be?
Okay. I will definitely YouTube my celebration dance. Actually, you know what? I will have a different celebration dance for each stretch goal that we reached. And I will post-date it So we are talking about a minimum of 7 celebration dances, and potentially 3 additional ones. Only
I believe that is reason enough for people to go on. Like, even if you aren't
Right.
interested in balloons at all, just to get those, I think that is reason enough for people to go up and throw some money at it.
And to answer your question, not choreographed at all. These will be
I think that's even
bizarre flailings of a very large man who's very happy with how his life has turned out. They may have a friendly rivalry to the concept of rhythm. They will be rhythm adjacent. Let's put it that way. They will be rhythm adjacent.
Very nice.
We'll be in the same ballpark.
Yeah, exactly. There will be a rhythm and there will be a dance. How much those two things meet? Who can pick?
They share a fence, but they're
really
not going to
crappy
fight each
neighbors.
other over it.
They've been dumping their leaves on the other neighbor's lawn and not picking up after the dog after they walk by. It's been bad.
Rhythm has never invited them over into the pool.
Right, exactly. And they have these super loud pool parties that they totally know about.
Right.
Yeah, they're not good neighbors.
All right, well, before we let you go, we do actually have 5 final questions that we call the final 5, ironically enough.
Okay.
They're 5 geeky, nerdy questions. You can either answer yes or no, or if you have some explanation behind it, that's fantastic. We just keep right on rolling.
Okay.
So I'll give you the first one is Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Okay. Are you excited for Rogue One?
Yes, cautiously optimistic. I loved Force Awakens. But right now I feel like we are at 4 really good Star Wars movies and 3 not really good Star Wars movies. So they're batting a little bit above 50% now. I hope that ratio gets better, but if it doesn't, so be it.
Not the original 3, but 1, 2, and 3 are almost completely unwatchable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of those movies. Although I'm still deeply interested. I've heard that there's been various edits of those to get like a film and a half out of the first 3.
I can do you one better, man.
Yeah,
I actually have, I believe, 100. It's around 180 minutes. I have a cut that includes all 3 movies together.
Nice. The other thing too that I've heard from people, and I'd be really interested to try this, is they said that the prequels, and again, with editing, are much better if they take place after The Empire Strikes Back. In viewing order. And the reason they said this, you have Luke's storyline. You've just got the reveal that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. Oh my gosh, Luke has lost his hand. Things are at their worst. Then you cut back to Darth Vader's origin and show who he was before he was Darth Vader. I think works a lot better because now you're hinting that there might be a possibility of redemption.
There actually is it's what they call the augmented machete order. If you watch 4, 5, then 2, 3, and then finish up with 6.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Don't even worry about 1 because it has absolutely no correlation to any of the other movies.
Yep.
You can
It's
cut
a hard
it out, and it doesn't make a lick of a difference.
Yep.
Yeah, that is the worst one of the bunch.
Yep. Well, and if I'm really going to geek out, the other thing I'll say about Star Wars is it's really hard for even the best of directors to avoid drowning in CGI, right? I think CGI, like all artistic tools, is amazing, but I think there is an artistry that comes out of practical effects that it's hard to capture again in CGI, and there's just something about people being in a place and figuring out how things work and making that work that gives the work something special. Like a great example was most recent Mad Max, which I love that movie.
Yeah.
And it uses a ton of CGI, right? But also there is a core of practical effects and stunt work that makes that movie.
Right.
And it uses the CGI to enhance the practical effects, but not to replace them.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I'm most happy with the newer Star Wars movies is they have that grounding of practical effects. Mm-hmm. And from that, I think, emanate a lot more externalities that you maybe wouldn't even expect, but somehow it elevates the work.
Right.
Yeah, I was happy with J.J. Abrams that they went to, started building sets, and they did go the practical effects route. I mean, obviously not 100%, but to include more of that in the movie, because it gives you a better point of reference as an actor. I mean, it's not Shakespeare, so you're writing for a sci-fi adventure story, so it's the writing is what it is. So to then not have any reference point while you're acting on top of it usually doesn't work very well.
Oh yeah. No, and it's all about using the right tools, right? Like no tool by itself is bad. Any tool. All right, you had final 5 questions. I counted 2.
Oh, that was only one.
Oh, okay. Well, I like these final 5.
All right, the next one is tabletop or video games?
Tabletop. Love video games. Right now, I don't have time for both. And so I'm happy to do tabletop and spend some time with friends and family that way.
Do you wind up playing things that you're working on designing, like, say, Salt and Wounds, more than, let's just play, Fiasco for fun?
Yeah, I actually find that there's this play that I do that's both very enjoyable, but it is for work. Right? Like I was doing the high-end Patreon subscriber game, and I'll be doing a bunch of playtest games for Salt and Wounds, and that will totally be something that I do. But I have to play games outside of that. So I have a D&D 5e game that I'm a player on, which is super fun. Has nothing to do with Salt and Wounds. It's just a good time. And then I'm always trying new tabletop games. I most recently really enjoyed Secret Hitler.
Oh, okay,
yeah. It's if you've never got a chance to play it, it's available as the beautiful set they released via Kickstarter. But it's available as a print and play for free. It's licensed. You can do that. And it is, if you've ever played Mafia or Werewolf, that party game where you're guessing people's identities, it is what those games should be.
Huh. Okay. High praise.
Yeah. Next time you got a party, I can't recommend it enough.
Okay, cool. Definitely have to check it out then.
Yeah.
DC or Marvel?
That one's really tough. DC. I'm sorry, not DC. Marvel. When DC is at its best, when DC is its best, I really, really love DC. But I think Marvel has just been more consistent overall. Both definitely in terms of movies. Okay, wait. I'll put it this way. Comics, barely Marvel, but Marvel because they don't reboot every 2 years. For movies, definitely Marvel. For animation, DC.
Oh, so like Batman animated series, Justice League animated.
Batman animated series, Justice League animated series, so many, and not all the DC animated movies, but a lot of them have been excellent. And you just don't get that same quality from Marvel animation. And because that is what I've watched more of those than I've read comics, although I do read comics. That's why I was stuttering for a second of choosing which, because I just love the DC animated universe. Oh, and also their TV. Marvel's gaining on them, but with the Flash and Arrow, those were really good superhero shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Gotham in an ancillary sort of way, I didn't pick up on it in the beginning, but it, it's not the superhero show per se, but it shows that, sort of underbelly of things and, sort of where a lot of, story plots and stuff come from. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah. I just think the networks love police procedurals, and they will do anything they can to force a concept into a police procedural format.
Right. I guess that's fair.
Yeah, like it could be like The Handmaid's Tale, and a network would pick it up if you pitch The Handmaid's Tale as a police procedural.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. This isn't one of the questions, but this is interesting because I also was a huge fan of the Batman animated series. Love it. I think I have them all on VHS. Never went out and bought the DVDs. I'm like, I got them. I'll watch them. I never watched them. Did you watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, and did you enjoy it?
Yes and yes.
One of the best shows ever on TV, in my opinion.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
bar none. I mean, ER, whatever, like at the window. It hit all the right beats, right? It was funny. It was serious. And they ruined it with that movie. I don't know what the hell they were thinking with bringing in M. Night Shyamalan for that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew it was going to be bad when they said who was directing.
Right. No, I was actually a fan too of the follow-up Korra, the next there.
Oh yeah, me too.
But I think that ended halfway through the second season or something like that. They just kind of cut it short. So
yeah, it had weird funding scheduling issues. I think they were able to finish it, but definitely not in the same way they were able to finish Avatar, where they really got the sense with Avatar they told exactly the story they wanted to tell, and with Korra, my sense was they told the best story they could tell with the limitations they had.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have to say is one of the things I loved about Avatar and Korra specifically is I loved the advance in the world. Like the world of Korra does not look like the world of Avatar, but in all ways that make sense given what developed in Avatar.
Right. And it's still, even though it takes place 50 or 60 years later, but it feels like a natural progression.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. If you get good magitech, in that case, metal bending was the big breakthrough. It changes the world.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Sci-fi or fantasy?
I love both, but if you make me choose, I would do sci-fi.
Okay. Cool.
Really?
Really, I love both. I recently have been writing a lot more fantasy, but if you made me choose what I enjoy to consume, yeah, it's sci-fi.
Yeah. Then have you ever thought about developing for sci-fi RPG instead of fantasy routes? Well,
I think one of the reasons that I've been attracted to developing fantasy is I think fantasy has a lot more unmined potential. I think fantasy is very much still labors in the shadow of Tolkien, and rightly so. I mean, basically invented the modern fantasy genre. There's other exceptions, but so much of fantasy is recreating Tolkien in a way that I can't think any other figure that's similarly monolithic over sci-fi. So even though, like I said, I enjoy reading sci-fi a lot, I feel like I have so far, at least in game design, had a lot more ideas for the unexplored potential of fantasy in a way that I have not had a ton of ideas for the unexplored potential of sci-fi.
Makes sense.
Okay. And if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Perfect timing. If you
Comedic perfect timing?
I actually have an approximation of that now. Mostly when I'm falling over. Not in terms of my words, but yeah. If you were just a regular guy, but everything you did was at the exact right moment for you to do that thing that you were doing, it would be incredible.
That's interesting. I have not heard that one before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Right. Well, and it's nice too because it's loosely enough defined that creative writers could make anything happen for me, and it would work out. It would work out great.
Exactly.
It's almost like a real life equivalent of Long Shot.
Yeah, exactly. Just give super luck powers, but of course there is Long Shot. So let's that perfect timing. I will tell you my favorite superhero story power that I ever named was I called someone an umbral kinetic. I was proud of that term.
Nice.
Yeah.
That would also be the same power as Galen.
Oh,
yes.
there you go. Yeah.
You've seen umbral kinetics around. I just don't know that there's been a word for what they do besides manipulation of shadows, which is clunkier.
Yeah. Cool. You want to let everybody know where they can find you? Give out all your details there.
Oh, yeah. So the easiest way to find me and what I do is jmperkins.com. It's going to have links to everything, although I need to update it now. If you're interested in Salt and Wounds, the best way to find that is, I believe there'll be links in the show notes, but if you just go to Kickstarter and search Salt in Wounds, you will find the project. Like I said, right now we are 450% funded. We've smashed my favorite quote I read today about the campaign or the Kickstarter was, It's smashing through stretch goals like a Tarrasque through a first level party. And I thought that was a pretty apt description for what's happening. But I'm super excited to do this. I want to do the best job I can. I would love to take your money, so please give me money. And just go to Kickstarter and search Salt and Wounds.
Cool, awesome. And I will indeed have all this stuff in the show notes.
And also, because there has been this question, the blog that I wrote about Salt and Wounds for a year and a half is saltandwoundsetting.com. That's going to stay up and stay free. So
nice.
If you want to run your own Salt and Wounds game, there is tons of material that's there, and that's not going anywhere. I just want to make books that are so well designed, so cool, and have such great rules that you will happily pay money for them, and you'll be very happy with that purchase.
Awesome. What about you, Jesse? I don't know that we've done this with you before, but you want to give out all your contact information there?
Sure, why not? Like anybody cares, but still. You can find me, I'm on Twitter at Killigex, or the Dragon Fisters are on Twitter with Dragonfisters. Then you can hit us up at thedragonfisters.com, where you can find links to all of us on Twitter and our Gmails and a plethora of our archives for the podcast and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. I will give our information out as well, but if you're listening to this, you probably already know it, so this is probably somewhat redundant, but you can find this podcast and all of our other stuff at legendsoftabletop.com. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you could reach us at legendsoftabletop@gmail.com. You can find us on all the social media sites, so you can stick us in your Google machine there and turn us up. We're on Instagram and iTunes and SoundCloud and all that good stuff. If you could rate us or review us on iTunes, that would be fantastic. We would love it. That helps us there and helps move the podcast up in the rankings. You can do that for the Dragon Fisters as well. No one over the other. You should go and do both. So I know Jesse would appreciate that. We want to thank everybody for checking this out. Check the website for the schedule. We have Archive 81 coming on Wednesday, which will be the 5th, I guess. But yeah, check the website for all the cool stuff that's coming up, and we'll catch you next time.
Guys, thank you so much for having me on. This was an absolute blast.
Oh, thanks for coming on. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah. And Jesse, and this might not be part of the episode or not, but I don't follow you on Twitter, I don't think, and I want to change that. So you said Killigex?
Yes. Kilogex.
O-G-E-X. There we go.